Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. Between September 2019 and June of 2020, I uploaded a series of videos covering every single Marvel vs Capcom fighting game ever made. Apart from allowing characters to appear side by side, in circumstances we never thought possible, these titles also innovated and astounded us in a number of other ways, most notably the 3-on-3 tag team combat where much of the action would take place fighting in the skies in aerial skirmishes. These were fun, chaotic, exciting games that remained unmatched at what they brought to the table. This was of course until 2018 came around and we got a game released from an entirely different franchise that offered a Marvel vs Capcom style gameplay experience. That was a whole nother level of quality to the recently released Marvel vs Capcom Infinite. Today we are going to be looking at what this Dragon Ball game did right, and what Infinite did wrong, and what it is about this tag team superhero like fighting game that made it so special. In this video we have a hell of a lot to get through, so without further ado, this ladies and gentlemen is the mad story of Dragon Ball FighterZ, the fighting game that crushed Marvel vs Capcom. Yeah! At the tail end of 2017, the world would receive the newest entry in the long celebrated Marvel vs Capcom fighting game series. Both then and now, Marvel vs Capcom Infinite is considered a somewhat controversial topic. Whilst this fighting game is mechanically adequate in what it delivers, it simply lacks soul in comparison to its predecessors. Gone are the bright cartoon sprites and 3-on-3 chaotic tag team action, and in its place are bland, realistic polygon character models and more simple 2-on-2 matches. To put the icing on the cake, the game is even missing many of Marvel vs Capcom's most beloved fighters, including every single member of the X-Men. Simply due to the fact that by leaving them out and reducing their presence, Disney would not be helping Fox make any money off of potential future X-Men movies, the current movie rights holders of the franchise at this game's time of release. From the game's roster, its graphical style, gem and microtransaction systems, everything about the game stinks of soulless modern Capcom and Disney corporate greed. This mismanagement in turn would lead to poor sales, and perhaps the last Marvel vs Capcom game ever made. Thankfully though, just 4 short months after this disappointing release, Dragon Ball FighterZ would arrive, a fighting game that hit all the right notes, resulting in a now beloved fighting game that presents players with all the bells and whistles that Marvel vs Capcom Infinite failed to deliver. All in all, this is one hell of a refined game. So, with all this in mind, let's go on a journey to look at the pieces of the puzzle that came together to form this fantastic experience. Our trip starts way back in 1984 with a gentleman known as Akira Toriyama. This Japanese manga artist and character designer first found mainstream recognition for his highly successful manga series Dr. Slump, before moving onto the franchise we all know and love, Dragon Ball. The initial manga that was written and illustrated by Toriyama started life being serialised in weekly Shonen Jump between 1984 and 1995, with 519 individual chapters collected into 42 volumes. Toriyama drew inspiration for his tale from a 16th century Chinese novel known as Journey to the West. The book, that is considered one of the greatest ever pieces of Chinese literature, is an extended account of the legendary pilgrimage of a Tang Dynasty Buddhist monk, Xuanzong, who travelled to the western regions, more commonly known as today the Indian subcontinent. The purpose of this journey was to obtain Buddhist sacred texts, but the monk would face many trials along the way. According to Toriyama himself, his Dragon Ball series that follows the adventures of protagonist Goku from his childhood through adulthood as he trains in martial arts was inspired by this literature, combined with his love of Hong Kong martial arts movies. The manga follows the adventures of Goku and his encounter with teen girl Bulma, who encourages him to join her quest in exploring the world in search of the 7 orbs known as the Dragon Balls. When these balls are brought together, they summon a wish-granting dragon, allowing the user to wish for pretty much anything they desire. Along his journey, Goku makes several other friends, becomes a family man, discovers his alien heritage, and battles a wide variety of villains, many of whom also seek the Dragon Balls. Dragon Ball would go on to become one of the most popular manga series of all time, and it continues to enjoy high readership today. Dragon Ball is even credited as one of the main reasons manga circulation was at its highest between the mid-80s and mid-90s. This newfound success would of course mean that the manga would be adapted into an anime. Producers Toei Animation would convert Toriyama's work into two series, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, which would end up proving so popular that Toei would choose to develop a further 20 animated feature films, 3 television specials, and even a television sequel series which would not be written by Toriyama, known as Dragon Ball GT, which they released in 1996. All of this would result in Dragon Ball becoming one of the most successful mangas and anime franchises of all time, with the manga selling in over 40 countries and the anime broadcasted in more than 80 countries. Personally, I would first get to view this great show on the 5th of March in the year 2000, when Dragon Ball Z finally aired in the UK for the first time, making its debut on the Cartoon Network. Even though I was at the tail end of my secondary school life by this point, the show was still the talk of the playground, and my next door neighbours, who did not have Sky Television, would pile into my living room every evening at 5 PM to see what would happen each episode. The show was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and was unforgettable due to its memorable cast of characters who would often take part in battle against larger than life villains in encounters that would literally last dozens of episodes. These were the most ridiculous fights I had ever seen, and would often go on forever, resulting in a surprising amount of violence for a cartoon broadcast on the Cartoon Network, and regular deaths of the characters were in the show too. It was certainly a programme that kept the viewer on the edge of their seats, with cliffhangers aplenty, leaving us to wonder what would happen next time we watched. For Dragon Ball, like with the success of any mega franchise, this of course brought with it many video games, the first of which was released exclusively in Japan in 1986 for the Epoch Super Cassette Vision. This simple game is an overhead shoot-'em-up that allows players to take on the role of Goku, who rides on the Nimbus while firing Kai blasts and swatting at enemies with his power pole. This was just the first Dragon Ball game, and since its release there have been close to 100 different video games released in the series. Dragon Ball's presence in the world of gaming has been huge, and as a result would spread across a range of different genres across the entirety of the gaming medium. When it comes to both the Western world and fighting games for that matter too, the first Dragon Ball fighting game, and the first title to be released outside of Japan, was Dragon Ball Z Super Batuden, which saw release in both France and Spain in November of 1993. The game included a roster of 13 different fighters, and was different to the typical fighting game of the era, in that it did not simply copy the experience found in Street Fighter 2. This Dragon Ball Z title features massive stages divided by a colour-coded split-screen border, which tells the players how close they are to their opponent. Combat can take place on the ground or in the air, and a radar is located below the health and power bar so players can tell where the characters are in the stage. There are also unique special moves and super moves for each character, such as Goku's Kamehameha. Players can also counter super moves by dodging, blocking or engaging in a beam struggle. The game, developed by TOS Software Company and published by Bandai, would bring aerial combat into the fold in a fighting game, years before Capcom's Marvel related releases. While some parts of Europe received Super Batuden, most of us in the West, including myself, was introduced to Dragon Ball in the world of gaming with Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, a game that was originally released everywhere throughout 1997, but would be reprinted in the early 2000s after the English dub of the Dragon Ball Z anime sent the franchise mainstream within the Anglosphere. This PlayStation game features a mixed roster of characters from both Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT, all of which are rendered as 3D polygon models. Considering how great the anime was, personally I was hugely disappointed when I played this game, and most review sources I can find seem to have shared similar experiences. Critics complain that this game, developed and published by Bandai, features a jerky camera, controls that respond too slowly, and gameplay that suffers from a lack of variety in movesets. IGN cheekily commented, "If you're a Dragon Ball Z fan, then you may like this game, simply because it stars all your favourite Dragon Ball characters. But to be honest, you might as well go out and buy all the toys. At least they're more controllable. For me personally, after this game popped my Dragon Ball game virginity, I long term lost all interest in playing any more Dragon Ball games. I instantly wrote off the franchise in the world of gaming, tying the franchise in the medium to the same brush as titles published by Acclaim or LJN, games that were sold on the IP's name value rather than actual quality, so I would actively avoid all titles featuring Dragon Ball branding. Interestingly, despite there being dozens of Dragon Ball games before this one, there would be a 5-year gap with no Dragon Ball games whatsoever. In many ways this makes sense, as 1997 would be the year the Dragon Ball GT anime ended, so the games died side by side with the anime, a period before most Dragon Ball media had even found a market in most of the West. With Dragon Ball's rise in prominence in the West though, Dragon Ball would return on the PlayStation 2, GameCube and original Xbox in 2002, with the release of a fighting game known as Dragon Ball Z Budokai. A fighting game that featured a plot that is an adaptation of the first 3 sagas of Dragon Ball Z with what-if storylines for each arc. The game is somewhat notable as it was developed by Dimps, a company that was founded by several former SNK and Capcom employees, including Street Fighter co-creator Takashi Nishiyama. Dimps would even go on to play a key part in the development of Street Fighter 4 at a later date, so have a good fighting game pedigree. Past this point, there would be Dragon Ball games released pretty much year in and year out, with the video game medium generally keeping the franchise alive, regularly selling relatively well, despite the lack of other entertainment mediums to help aid these sales. This ongoing popularity of the franchise would eventually result in a brand new manga and anime by Toriyama and Toei Animation, known as Dragon Ball Super, that was released in 2015, 18 years after the final episode of Dragon Ball GT aired. Since Toriyama only wrote Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z rather than GT, GT would be treated as a non-canon alternative universe, with him picking up the writing for his new series Dragon Ball Super directly where Dragon Ball Z finished. When it comes to this move, part of me hopes that one day Disney hired George Lucas to create canon versions of Star Wars Episodes 7 through 9, so we can treat their terrible fan fiction they wrote as alternative universe stuff too. Thinking about it, we can place GT and the new Star Wars films in the same box, but I guess that's a bit unfair on GT. Of course, with new anime, it gave the games all new source material to draw from, and extra marketing exposure for the franchise too. But out of all of the new games we've received in this new era of Dragon Ball, the one I feel is most worth talking about of all is Dragon Ball FighterZ, the subject of this video. Dragon Ball FighterZ was developed by Arc System Works, who, as you'll probably know, have a huge amount of fighting game pedigree. In their early years as a company, they would port arcade games with fighting elements to home consoles, such as converting both Double Dragon and Vigilante, so that they could be played on the Sega Master System. By 1994, they would be making decent Sailor Moon fighters, but their first huge splash came with the release of Guilty Gear for the Sony PlayStation, the fantastic sprite-based fighting game that featured weapons-based fighting with pages taken out of the Samurai Showdown playbook. There would be a number of Guilty Gear's games released over the years, and the company would also go on to establish the BlazBlue fighting game franchise as well, which has always been critically well received. Amongst the many games developed by Arc, they would also create multiple Dragon Ball handheld games, but none of them received the same level of critical success to what they would put out in 2018, with the release of Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, where to even start talking about what this game brings to the table? It gives players so bloody much. To try and put it simply, at its heart, Dragon Ball FighterZ is a 3D fighting game simulating 2D. The game was released after Dragon Ball Super, meaning a number of classic characters were included in this game, along with various characters designed by Toriyama in the modern era. The game was initially released on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One and PC in January 2018, but due to popular demand would be converted to run on the Nintendo Switch later that same year. Like Marvel vs. Capcom at its very best, Dragon Ball FighterZ allows players to pick trios of 3 characters who could team up in tag-in and tag-out action against trios of opponents. This format allows for plenty of fast-paced chaotic fun. that results in players being able to perform a number of assists unique to each character, along with the ability to use flashy attacks, projectiles, and take part in all sorts of aerial skirmishes. The game contains a great intuitive fighting system, a huge interesting character roster, fantastic visuals, an intriguing story mode, online play, memorable music and more. To fully understand the greatness of this game, we need to begin tackling all of these areas, so let's begin breaking it down further as there is so much to get through today. First, let's touch more on the game's combat system. The moment you start playing this game, you will instantly notice how much inspiration mechanically seems to have been taken from the Marvel vs. Capcom series, most notably Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like these other games, during 3 vs 3 encounters, characters can be switched out at will and have the ability to perform assist moves that allow for simultaneous attacks involving a player's whole team. There are just 4 attack buttons, light, medium, heavy and a special attack button, typically mapped to a projectile. Each character has their own unique moveset with attacks that fall in line with what can be witnessed in the anime, along with several universal moves that are available across the roster. Amongst characters' arsenals, moves can be performed known as vanish attacks. Vanish attacks allow players to teleport behind opponents so they can strike them from behind, but have other uses such as giving users the ability to avoid projectiles, extend combos, or simply move around the stage at a faster pace. The game also features Dragon Rush moves, which are used for breaking opponents' guards. Once an opponent's guard is down, it is then possible to launch them up into the air for an air combo, or even force them to tag out so you can take down a different character of their team. We also have super dash fly manoeuvres that allow players to pass through weaker projectiles to attack opponents, and players can perform a Kai charge that lets them manually increase their Kai gauge. To put it simply, a Kai gauge is the game's jargon for a super meter, which can be filled with energy that can be expended to perform certain moves. On top of these functions, the game also features a mechanic known as Come On Shenron, which basically lets fighters gather Dragon Balls as fights progress. Sometimes these Dragon Balls are gifted by the game for performing specific combos throughout an encounter. If a player manages to assemble all 7, Shenron appears to grant a wish. The player will receive a choice of increasing their fighter's strength, reviving a fallen ally, recovering a fighter's health, or regenerating health for the rest of the match. Overall, this mechanic is a nice touch, especially considering it feeds back perfectly to the anime and manga. We also have dramatic finishes, essentially special cutscenes that appear at the end of a fight depending on the characters involved in stage, related to events from the Dragon Ball series. These can provide satisfying ends to encounters reminiscent of the fatality system found in Mortal Kombat, only much easier to execute. The game was launched with a base roster of 21 different characters, most of which originate from other Dragon Ball media, with a further 3 fighters being unlockable, through achieving various in-game feats. The game's roster pretty much provides a who's who of important warriors from both the Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super TV shows. Amongst the lineup of characters, we have one known as Android 21, a character who has never appeared in the manga or anime, who Akira Toriyama designed specifically for this game. In regards to her role, we shall touch on her more shortly, but first let's talk a little more about this game's other fighters. On top of the 24 characters who came in the base version of the game, a further 8 fighters were made available if players purchased the Fighters Pass as DLC. This pass included Android 17, as well as a number of notable characters who were in the Dragon Ball movies. The game would prove popular enough that by January 2019, another wave of 6 DLC characters would arrive, containing more characters from the movies, Dragon Ball Z, Super, and even Child Goku from Dragon Ball GT. Again, since this game is still very popular, even now, Wave 3 of DLC characters are slowly being announced, with Master Roshi becoming the latest selectable fighter in this now huge lineup. Now, whilst a game's story is often a less important aspect of a fighting game, Dragon Ball FighterZ story is one of the elements that makes this game shine, as the in-game cutscenes in the title's story mode make the player literally feel like they are watching the anime itself. These scenes are all very entertaining and completely watchable. The story of this game somewhat focuses around the title's main antagonist, who is Android 21, who we briefly touched on earlier. I will not give any spoilers with regards to this game's ending, but at the beginning of the story, she repairs Android 16 and uses the Dragon Balls to resurrect Frieza, Cell, Nappa and the Ginyu Force. She also seals away the powers and the souls of all of Earth's strongest warriors. She does though develop a linking system originally created by Dr. Giro, in which a human soul, the player, can possess the warriors and provide them with strength, thus meaning that the players themselves play a role in this game's story, as they possess and control various warriors throughout this play experience. In a further interesting twist, we learn about Android 21's intentions gradually as we play through a story mode 3 separate times, possessing different parties, gaining further and further perspective. We first play as the game's heroes in a mode known as the Super Warrior arc, where the players possess Goku and co. The second time we play as the villains, where we possess Frieza, Cell, etc. And the third time around, our questions are fully answered when we play the game possessing Android 21. Speaking of Android 21, the character is pretty amusing, as she seems to share a lot of similarities with Majin Buu, in that she can transform her opponents into sugary snacks and eat them. This results in what looks like a lot of sexually charged moments, where she is often telling the other characters in the game how delicious they look, and how she wants to snack on them, often threatening to gobble them up. Until the release of this game, I never realised how much Toriyama must be into vor. Overall though, Dragon Ball has always had its strange sexual moments, so I guess it's all pretty hilarious and on brand. When playing through with these 3 story arcs, along the way players unlock various different characters, who can even be levelled up to give the game an extra sense of progression. When levelling up, new skills can be learned, allowing players to benefit from extra health, defense or stronger special attacks, all in all providing an extra layer to this mode. If Dragon Ball is not something you're into, but you just love fighting games in general, then the game's arcade mode has you covered. Not only does this let players test their skill in 3 vs 3 combat, but the game adds extra appeal by grading players' performances after each fight. How well you do determines the difficulty of your next round of opponents. Continue on the path to high grades gives this mode an extra reason to keep going. Rather than a simple in-game menu, Dragon Ball FighterZ opted to include a lobby like Overworld instead, which can be navigated by moving around your chibi avatars. We could talk more about the significance of chibi, but I feel my Pocket Fighter video has that area covered, so why not check that out next? Anyway, within this lobby, players can also communicate with others online through emotes and stickers that use screen grabs from the show. Additional unlockables can be purchased in this lobby through the in-game currency, which can be procured through completion of runs of the game's story arcs and arcade mode. The lobby also obviously presents players with the ability to fight other players online, which apparently was a bit rough around the edges on release, but has reportedly been improved a lot over time. The game would be both a critical and commercial success for Arc System Works, thus far selling over 5 million copies. In fact, it even set a Steam record for the highest number of concurrent users for a fighting game ever. With regards to this game, IGN would state that between the accessible auto combos, homing attacks and simplified command inputs, Dragon Ball FighterZ is an inviting gateway into the world of fighting games for newcomers, whether you're a Dragon Ball fan or not. Dragon Ball FighterZ has enough depth and complexity to glow as brilliantly as a Super Saiyan. GameSpot would praise this title too, agreeing that FighterZ is complex and distinct enough to be enjoyed by fighting game competitors, but there is no question that it's been designed to tap into the hearts of Dragon Ball's most dedicated fans, and no doubt those same qualities will win people over who've never given the series a chance. Where past games attempted to get there through huge character rosters and deliberately predictable trips down memory lane, FighterZ has bottled the essence of what makes the series' characters' animation and sense of humour so beloved and reconfigured it into something new. A Dragon Ball fighting game that can go toe to toe with the best of the genre. Across the board, players and journalists alike love this game, with many people now starting to believe that this is not just the greatest Dragon Ball game ever made, but the very best fighting game of this entire generation. The game delivered on every level. Whilst this is a sad state of affairs with regards to how low the Marvel vs Capcom brand has fallen, and what a disappointment Marvel vs Capcom Infinite was, does it really even matter that much considering we have Dragon Ball FighterZ to play instead, as our crazy cartoon 3-on-3 chaotic fighting game? I personally don't think so. In terms of quality, this game completely destroyed its competition, and what may amaze you further is that this game has currently sold over 5 times as many copies as Marvel vs Capcom Infinite, a game that despite being disappointing is full of well-known characters owned by both Capcom and Disney. Goku and co really did annihilate their competition this time around. Just freaking wow. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of Dragon Ball FighterZ, the game that destroyed Marvel vs. Capcom. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of today's episode, and if I was to cover one of the hundreds of other Dragon Ball games, which would you like to see me do a deep dive on next? I would be very curious to hear your thoughts. If you are new here due to the Dragon Ball franchise, introducing yourself to me, then to let you know I upload multiple weekly videos covering gaming's history each week, including analysing a different fighting game from the past each Thursday. So don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that notification bell for plenty of in-depth videos. It is also possible in part to make these ridiculous long videos due to the additional funding my Patreon backers provide the show with, that allow me to work on content like this on a full-time basis. If you want all my content early and more, why not consider becoming a backer yourself? Special thanks go out to Sebastian Bellis, Carl Johnson, The Murder of Crows, Heyo Paulo Lopez, Joseph Rasmick, Doug Perkins, Corey I. Marsh Sr., Lou Johnson, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinch, Evan Balder, Philip Manth, Cambo Rambo 82, Azrael Rawakai, Keith Ferguson, Dropquin Varela, Brits Knight, Michael Cullix, Ago, Jordan Durant, TOG Driver, Angel Light 85, Alethea Swanson, Timothy W. Haskins II, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Carlos Domingos, Glennie Glenn, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of the Ted, Sponge Matt B, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Tony Tran, Aaron McNamara, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, PostDXL, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang-hee, Ted Stickles, Langston Miller, New, Brian Barry, Sir Lagney, Stephen Lewis, Sarah Powell, Flaming Renee, Sarai H. Al Sarai, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stu Stewart, James McDonald, Crazy Yarl, Dan Van Dammit, Adam Castin, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bell, Chris Fisk, Paul Elliott, Mean Machine Dean, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Hans Christian, Craig Jenkins, Tom Elliott, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, and Andrew Bezansky. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support. I love to entertain you. Yeah. Cheerio.